Hello and welcome back. This is going to be the next part to Path of the Empress, Step 16, with our focus on the Tower card. And what I want to briefly focus on is learning to face conflict. I should more say learning to not be afraid of conflict, because conflict avoidance often creates a lot more towers than necessary, and it goes hand in hand with the first part of this step about learning to allow towers to happen. And sometimes that includes being willing to speak up and say, hey, I don't deserve to be treated that way, or the kids don't deserve to be treated that way, or I want you to do this, or the way you're behaving is unacceptable, or to stand up for family and friends when you see that they're being mistreated and things like that. It can also include like speaking up when things are tyrannical with the government, or being willing to share your opinion even if it's unpopular or you feel like it's going to create debates or arguments with others. I'm seeing 10:33 on the clock, 7. It can create momentum and create victory, though only if you learn to heal that with which within you causes you to fear conflict. That was a weird download-ish. And usually what is most helpful, and what's been most helpful for me and others I know, is to go back in and think about what conflict was like for you growing up, and what conflict has continued to manifest like for you now. Because oftentimes our fear of conflict is rooted in a fear of rejection and a fear of abandonment, and that creates anxiety. So when we think about telling someone, hey, I really don't like it when you do that, we make it into a much bigger deal than it needs to be. Or it could even be something like telling your DM that you have more feelings than just like absurd kindness and things like that. And it can also include sharing loving feelings. Like, to be able to do that requires getting past fear of conflict. But it's also this is important for life in general. But when it comes to the twin flame journey specifically, you have to recognize that part of being a twin flame. This is part of why a lot of people turn away from the journey, because it includes a lot of triggering. I just had a talk with somebody the other day that like they appear to have met their twin flame, and we talked about it. Like, it can be very fulfilling and it can be very fun and rewarding, but it comes with triggering because it's a healing journey. And in order to get that healing, it comes through being triggered. So until you can get to the point to where you can kind of be in a place to where, one, you embrace the absurdity of it, like the delightful divine comedy in the fact that you are going to trigger each other, and you're going to trigger others too. And like, just being a twin flame, it doesn't just mean triggering your partner, your twin. It means triggering others and getting them into healing. And most often, twin flames already grew up triggering others without even meaning to. And that's how we tend to develop our fear of conflict, our fear of speaking up, and a fear of being ourselves, just being fully authentic. And right now, especially with the with Saturn just having gone into Aquarius and being in aspect to Jupiter and Uranus, right now authenticity is a really, really big thing. So right now is a great time to work on this. People are wanting a little rebellion and wanting to speak up, and also just in general, when it comes to basic relationship coaching, and when it comes to masculines, like, oftentimes when we're in unhealthy feminine energy and we have poor self-confidence, especially when separation occurs, or if you've not been in union with your masculine yet and you're trying to get there, we think that we need to always be kind and loving, and to never speak up or say anything that might push them away or might make them think that we don't like who they are, or things like that, largely because we recognize that they already have fears in that and we don't want to trigger that. But actually, the funny thing is that most men, especially healthy emotional men, or those that get to that point, they fall in love most often with women who are not afraid to tell them when they're full of shit, you know? And, but it takes a certain finesse too, and you can't really get there until you learn to not be conflict avoidant or afraid of conflict, because when you're afraid of conflict, because you're afraid of rejection and abandonment and of not being accepted for all of who you are, because you're a whole person. You don't just have happy feelings, you don't just have icky feelings, you have all of them. And in order to have a healthy relationship with anybody, you want to be yourself and be accepted for all of who you are, for better and for worse, for richer and for poorer, and things like that. It's funny, my nose is itching, which means my DM is likely thinking about me right now. In any case, the trick is to get to a point to where you can recognize when it's time for a trigger with anyone, but Spirit often uses our twins in order to help us figure out how to see that coming. But when you can get to that point, you can recognize conflict is going to be there, and you're not afraid of it. And because you're not afraid of it, you don't overdo it. Because a lot of times what happens is that we're so afraid of conflict that we allow it to continue, and it builds up, and it builds this tension, and then we blow up. And then we're a lot meaner than we need to be. We're more defensive. We're more cutting with our silver tongues, you know, and we take it to a deep place it really doesn't need to go to. And then we create more towers and those things, because we then have to go back and look at what did we say that was really valid and what was appropriate or inappropriate. But I don't want you to run from those parts. You probably already done them half a dozen times. I know I have. But when you get into those, part of the healing is actually looking at, like, don't go back and just apologize for everything every time. Yes, apologize for what you need to apologize for. Even if nothing else, just to say, hey, I did mean what I said, but I didn't need to say it in such a mean way. And I'm sorry that the impact of how I said it really, really hurt you. And I know that it would have hurt me if it had been done in return to me, and it hurts me to see myself behaving that way with you, somebody I love so much. Definitely own that stuff. It's part of the process. You're going to go through it anyways, because a lot of us, especially on the DF side, we tend to be in a place where we over-apologize for things, and then we rebound because people keep saying, don't apologize so much, stop saying you're sorry, look at all the things that they've done. But no, you want a healthy balance in the middle. And we'll talk more about that stuff later. But for right now, really, sit and think about what your history has been like when it comes to conflict. What do you think, write out what conflict is, and then make a list. Like, what do you think of, what is conflict? Because a lot of people don't even really understand what they perceive is conflict. And really then start getting to a point to where you start changing your vocabulary to where it's no longer conflict, it's contrast. It's just contrast. It means that you are getting an experience that is contrasting to either what you believe, or it's just not a compliment. Like when you say, hey, I'd really like you to talk to me more, and they say, no, I don't wanna. Like, that creates contrast. Or like when you send a heartfelt love message and you get no response, that's contrast. It's not conflict. Or even when you try to talk to them about something, like say you have kids with them and you're like, hey, look, you need to see them more, or you need to hold yourself more accountable and not treat them like they're equally accountable for messes that have been made by adults and things like that, and they act like you're trying to create a fight, or they don't want to talk about it, or they're not being accountable. Like, that creates a contrast, because a compliment would be like, well, I agree, and you're right, and can you help me do this? Whereas contrast is like them acting like a bigger child than children. Or like, say that you just go to someone and say, hey, when this happens, I feel hurt by people saying that I'm just trying to create a fight when I'm just trying to talk about something. And then you think about, oh, well, that person's going to get defensive and tell me I'm wrong or something like that. That's contrast. And then also the next thing to do is start reframing it. Start looking at how, you can recognize that contrast can help you grow, and that it's not a bad thing if you end up having some contrast, if you get triggered, if they get triggered, and then actually the less afraid of it you are, the less triggered you get, and then the less easily you're manipulated also. And because you're going through that healing and becoming less manipulative, guess what? Your twin starts to reflect. And that's where some cool stuff really happens. All right, I'm going to leave this here, and I will see you in the next part of this step. Thanks for watching.